Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. How are you all today? Everybody doing okay? So, how is everyone coping with the circuit breaker? 有没有乖乖? So, today is a bit special. Today I had in mind to share this sutta about this conversation between the Buddha and a prince. I also got a series of questions or topics that was offered to me, quite a lot. Yeah, so the topics include how to structure practice during this COVID circuit breaker period, the various stages of reflection for meditation, how to manage tension at home with estranged or unreasonable family members during circuit breaker, how to best accrue merits for good rebirth or good present life, how to prepare ourselves for death, very heavy topic, how to cultivate and engage in compassion with wisdom, how to differentiate between compassion with and without wisdom. Some of these are relevant to some of the ongoings in recent days. How to relate to uncooperative members who are not adhering to guidelines compassionately. How to cultivate love for someone who have done us wrong or indifferent to, or whom we just find so laughable. Well, there's quite a lot of how to do this, how to do that. Yeah. How to deal with jealousy or competitiveness towards others in areas we prize in. How to incorporate mindfulness when it's unconducive to practice at home. Are you all practicing at home? Maybe you all can leave comments in the chat, and then you can let me know. Yeah. So, yeah, all these are very, very good questions and topics. So I'm a bit split into as to which one to cover. Yeah. So, what do y'all think? Do you have any preference? Some of you wrote yes, yes, yes. Oh, to the question whether you are cultivating. That's good. So, yeah, there are a number of students who have asked before as well how to maintain peace and harmony in the family during this period. Yeah. Louis O says cover all. Cover all, then we'll be here for the whole day. Michael seems asked to cover more on the meditation topics. Phyllis says trying to cultivate at home, but nothing beats attending sessions at temple or BL, as it's rather distracting at home. How many of you find it distracting at home? You can perhaps is it distracting at home? Of course, you will find it distracting at home. My teacher once shared, when we say 出家出家，是出烦恼家，家是烦恼聚集之地。Yeah, something like that. That when we say home, right? Yeah, it is seen as the aggregation of defilements. So, not so easy to practice at home in a way. But in a way, home is also where we need to be doing our practices. Yeah, whether it is the COVID-19 period or not. Yeah. When we go to the temple to practice, that is like a swimming pool. So imagine if our cultivation is like learning to swim. Okay. So ultimately, when we know how to swim, then we can swim anywhere. Yeah. But initially, when we are trying to learn how to swim, we don't go to the river. Okay, sometimes I could be wrong. I think the older generations learn swimming in the Longkang River. But today, most people would learn swimming in the swimming pool. Yeah. And after you learn how to swim in a swimming pool, you start off in the middle pool and then in the deep pool. And if you are younger, you may start off in the baby pool, then middle pool, and at some point to the deep pool. So the monastery, the temples, Buddhist centers it serves as a swimming pool, as a training ground for us to have a safe, quiet place, to practice, to build up our practices first. And then when you're out of the monastery, when you're out of the temple, to be able to continue that practice. So some of you have replied. Some of you find that there's no difference. Yes, doing other things can be part of cultivation. Sometimes it's distracting, sometimes not distracting. There's a tendency to do other things. Gek-seng says that his father is very noisy, so he meditates at night. So finding the right timing can be a solution. So some of you find that it's peaceful and quiet at home. That's wonderful. I'll do my chanting first thing in the morning. So you can share some tips. How you can actually find your little space. Wu Xiu says practice can be done everywhere. Very good. So we can say that there are two kinds of practice. The formal kind of practice. So we do our chanting, do our meditation, we do our reflection. So we can say that is a formal kind of practice. And then there's the other kind of practice. Doesn't mean the other kind is informal, but it's the other aspects of practice, which is to develop that awareness. Like for example, in the Noble Eightfold Path under right effort. Right effort is actually not just when we are doing chanting or sitting, then it's right effort. Right effort is when to be aware of our mental state. Whether we are sitting, whether we are chanting, whether we are cooking, whether we are sweeping the floor, whether we are bathing, we are eating, in whatever we are doing, to check. Is the state of my mind coupled with purity or impurity? Is it wholesome or is it unwholesome? So this form of practice is a bit different from the formal practice. a bit different from the formal practice. Different in what sense? Different in the sense that maybe we are not so used to it. We are used to the idea of practice or cultivation in the formal sense. We go to the temple, we join a Fa Hui, we chant. We chant the sutra, we chant Xiang Zan, we chant Buddha's name, the mantra, and so on. We do meditation. That is practice. But when we, what about outside of this formal practice? By right, actually we should also continue the practice, which is to be aware of our body, speech, and mind, starting with our mind, and to check, is our mental state, is it wholesome or unwholesome? In a way, not very difficult, but in some ways very difficult. So, Ru Xiu says, noise is good for practicing. Yes. Noise is good for us to practice certain aspect. But on the other hand, when you are doing certain practices, it is not so conducive. Why do I say that? So, you can use noise to practice in terms of your awareness. You can use it to practice your patience. You can also learn to catch your discriminating mind, using the noise or the sound. The fact that if we call it noise, we are discriminating. It's just sound. But at the same time, the Buddha's instructions to the monks was to practice in Jijing Chu, to practice in quiet places. So this is very interesting. In the Vinaya, in the teachings to the monks and nuns, the Buddha don't advise the monks and nuns to go to noisy places to practice. So seems to be a conflict. Because we have heard before masters, teachers who say that, places that is very chaotic is good for your practice. But on the other hand, the Buddha advised the monks and nuns to find quiet places. So what is going on here? So when we consider the Buddha, we can say, I think the Buddha understands the need for most people in the initial stages to have quiet places to practice. So when the Zen masters say that, or some of the teachers say that, those places that is noisy is good for practice, it is with regards to using what we call 逆增上缘. That means opposing conditions, to use it, transform that opposing conditions to become a cultivation factor. So if you can do that, then you can practice in many places. But for most people at the start, it's a bit difficult. A bit difficult. So, Esther C say, 杂音是个考验. Long time ago, some years back in 2007, when I went to Myanmar for 3 months range retreat, I was expecting that it would be like, retreat center, quiet and serene. But it was almost amazing. There were a lot of sound. All kinds of insect sounds. Even the lizard sound was like really strong. And there were birds and so on. But they were still okay, nature and so on. And then at late at night, 9+10, somehow there were some small houses or something just outside of the retreat center, and they were playing very loud, like discotheque kind of music. I was most surprised. So I reported this to the Sayadaw. And then Sayadaw asked me, "Are you disturbed by it?" Then I was a bit like, ah. So clearly I was disturbed by it, you know. And then so he told me, he said, well, you should. Did you? He asked me whether I noted it. So in the Mahasi tradition, there's this practice of noting whatever processes happen. So when you hear sound, to note hearing, hearing, hearing. And in this way, when you do that, if you do it diligently, then in a way you catch or you interrupt the discriminating process. Because it's very fast. The moment you hear, our minds start to discriminate like or dislike. If you like, then it's music. If you don't like, it's noise. Yeah. So by putting in this practice to label it, to note it. Yeah. When you hear something, you just hear, hearing. Yeah. It changes that response. Changes that response. So when he asked me, "Did you note it?" I'm like, apparently I wasn't quite noting it initially. So after that so after that I tried to do it, whether it's birds, the insects, all kinds of insect sounds. No. I think he went to tell them to not play loud music. I don't know whether that was part of a test or something. I don't think so. But after a few days, they stopped playing. Then the neighboring monks in the other kuti, they started doing chanting late at night. Again, 9+10. Yeah, and it was for a long duration. So because during the retreat, we wake up early in the morning and we sleep early. So at 9+10, we're starting to retire, and then started chanting. So initially, 烦恼, start to have all kinds of thoughts. How come this place is so noisy? Yeah, got so many sound. How come there's even music playing somewhere nearby? I thought everybody here should be meditating. How come then when there's no more music, how come these monks are not sleeping at night? Why are they chanting? So our discrimination is very interesting. So after that I reported again, and then again the Sayadaw asked me, "Do you note it?" Oh gosh, it's a one stop, fix all kind of solution. But it's interesting, whether it's using this noting method, or in the Pure Land tradition, whatever happens, they just bring Amitofo back to mind, or bring the mind back to Amitofo. Or in some traditions, when they are practicing mindfulness of the breath, no matter what happens, they just pay attention to the breath. Or another practice is, long time ago, this venerable teach us. So, 眼观鼻，鼻观心. So basically still observing the breath, observing the mind. All these practices actually can help us. The trouble is whether we are able to do it consistently. Whether we can do it consistently. If you can do it, then noise is no noise. Another practice that I shared in some other classes is, especially if during this period, we are all spending a lot of time at home. So when we hear some sound, hear with compassion. This is not a theory, this is really a practice that you can do. So it means when you hear whatever sound you hear, you don't start discriminating and thinking this sound is irritating and so on and so forth, but you go and consider whether there's suffering behind it. whether there's suffering behind it. When we do this frequently enough, it becomes a natural response, and compassion arises. When compassion arises, no time to worry or consider, or am I disturbed? Do I like it or not? Yeah, no time for that. So whether what you see, what you hear, if you can do that, but not so easy. Can try. So what about the topic that I wanted to share? I mentioned earlier. Let me load up the web page. So this sutta is from the Majjhima Nikaya 58. I shared this the other day. It's titled Abhaya Sutta to Prince Abhaya. So a few days back, and I think it's not just one incident, but a couple of different incidences of different individuals who flouted the circuit breaker measures, going out without the mask, and so on and so forth. And then I think recently there are even cases of those, what do you call them? There are even cases of the ambassadors being like slapped or being attacked by the public. But before I continue, I want to clarify. I'm not a mouthpiece for the government or anything. Yeah. I just thought this is something to reflect on. Yeah. I think just before the circuit breaker, there were long queues in different places. I think there was some news about IKEA, people queuing up at IKEA, people going to night spots and so on and so forth before they have the shutdown of all the non-essential places like entertainment and so on and so forth. Yeah, and it's got to do with how we look at the situation. And so it seems as though when we look at the behavior, people are equating the ruling to be the cause, and then the result is we cannot go out. But the reverse is true. It is more that it is unsafe to go out. That's why the rule was put in place. So some may be wondering, like, okay, but what has that got to do with Buddhism, right? Actually, if you think about it, sometimes we observe the precepts in the same way. We look at the precepts as though, because the Buddha say we cannot do it, so we don't do it. But rather it's the other way around. It's because the Buddha saw that doing certain actions is harmful to us, harmful to others. That's why he gave the teachings highlighting how these actions are harmful. And that's why in Buddhism the precepts are the word sila actually don't mean precepts. The word sila is more like, almost always translated as precepts, jie. But one of the meaning of sila is behavior. Yeah, so the behavior meaning our body and speech. What kind of behavior is conducive for happiness? What is not conducive for happiness? And then there's also the sikka, something sikka, padam, samadhi, yami. Yeah. So the word sikka is training. So the words that we use are oftentimes translated as precepts, but also as training rules. Yeah. To help us train, to train us to move towards purity. Yeah. So it is not that because the Buddha set the rules, so we cannot do it, but rather because the Buddha saw that doing certain things leads to harm, leads to suffering, and so he advised that if you do not want suffering, then you may want to, you probably don't want to do this. So it is the same as there's this thing about car seat belt. I'm a person who is perfectly at ease with wearing seat belt. So whenever I go into a vehicle, I will put on seat belt, whether I'm sitting in front or behind. And I think even last time before there was I think in the past it was required that, of course, the driver must wear seat belt, and then the passenger in front must wear seat belt. And I think for a while the rule for wearing seat belt behind is a bit grey, I think. Yeah. But then ultimately it became like the norm that everybody must wear seat belt as long as they're in the car. And I've always quite happy to just put on seat belt. And some students, yeah, they're quite funny. They share with me that, they only put on seat belt when they're in Singapore. Overseas they don't put on seat belt. I'm like, what? They say, because overseas you don't need to wear. But that's besides the point, So it's the same thing, right? It is not because of some rule that's why we need to put on seatbelt. At the first place, cars, a long time ago, in the early days, cars didn't have seatbelt. Seatbelts were designed, the 3-point seatbelt, our seatbelt is, I think, called the 3-point seatbelt. So there's 3 anchor points, one across one shoulder, the other 2 near our waist. There were different types of seatbelts, and seatbelts were put in place because of the development of car vehicles. That over time the performance of cars start to become better and better, but the safety didn't catch up. So deaths due to motor car accidents increased. So then the industry came together, and I think, was it Volvo? I think some guy from Volvo came out with the 3-point car seatbelt, and then it became a standard. So the fact that seatbelts came about and became a standard is not simply because of some ruling, some government ruling, but rather it's because it improves safety. Yeah, it doesn't guarantee that you will not die, but it increases the chance of you not dying. Yeah. So that's the cars, the precepts, and in this case, the same thing goes for going out or not going out, wearing a mask when you go out or not. Yeah. I'm not an expert in virology. I'm not medically trained, but if you look at all the different doctors and medical professionals' advice is, that having the mask can help. Yeah. It doesn't guarantee that you will have 0 infection, but it will drastically reduce that. I'm not going to go into all the details, and you can see a lot of analysis online. Yeah. The point is, so what happens if there are those who don't follow the rule? There are those who look at it and look at it as a crime. Once there's a bill, and you flout it, there are penalties. So in a way, it's a crime. It's not a criminal thing, but it's still against some rule, right? So that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is whether there's the rule or not. If someone were to go out without the mask, that person risks infection, regardless of the intent. And that's very crucial. We'll come back to this. Okay, so regardless of the intent, the person is exposed himself to infection and then becomes a potential carrier to to spread, so becomes a cluster center. Yeah, so harming themselves potentially. Yeah, it's not a must. It's not a guarantee again. Yeah, it's not like you don't wear seatbelt, you immediately die. But you are increasing the chance. The more rides you take without a seatbelt, the higher the chance that you will meet with that you will get injured due to an accident. 所谓上得山多纵一虎, right? So so whether there's a rule or not, this is still true. So that's another angle to look at it. That we should be concerned for people who don't wear the mask, not simply because they are breaking the rule, but because out of compassion for their well-being, because they'll get infected, and also for others' well-being, because there are some people who say that it's okay lah, if I get infected, that's my problem. No, it's not just your problem anymore, because there are limited resources to deal with this medical pandemic. This COVID-19 pandemic. We have only limited resources for treating patients who have complication. Current stats seem to be that 80% will just get mild symptoms because of the infection. There are some percentage that will be quite serious. And of course, there are people who will come in and say, oh, then the solution should be to build tons of ICU units, ICU, and have a lot of ventilators and a lot of all those things. Well, this is another thing altogether. This is called a toilet problem, or the lift problem, or the road problem. All these are the same problem expressed in different scenarios. In a nutshell, is if you have one person staying in a house, you only need one toilet to ensure 100% access to the toilet. But if you have two person, then you don't have 100%. But because you don't need to use the toilet all the time, so for two persons staying in a house to have one toilet, that's still doable. But once you increase the number of people staying in a place to crossing some threshold, then you need to increase the number of toilets to ensure that the wait time is kept to a minimum. So this is a whole science altogether. This whole statistical analysis is done in many different industries. In computing industry, it's used to analyze networks. Because our traffic, like now you're watching this live, you don't have a dedicated connection to my computer. Because today, well, not today, HTTP internet is connection, is disconnected network. So you don't have one solid line connecting everybody, but the data are sent in packets. And to optimize that, you build just enough, to cater for the traffic, such that everybody, even at peak load, just wait a bit. So that's the most efficient. Why? Because otherwise you are overbuilding, and for the most part, the infrastructure is not used. So it's like our roads, right? If you have only one person in the whole of Singapore, then you don't need to build roads. If you have two person, you need to build one road for them to go to each other. But if you want to allow each person to go to each other's house freely without obstruction, then you need to build two routes, even though there are only two persons. Now, why would anybody visit the other person if the other person is also visiting you? Escapes me, okay? But the theoretical analysis is like that. And if you increase the number of people and you still want to have one-to-one, the numbers just increase tremendously. And at the same time, we are not all using the roads. So most of the time, the roads will be vacant and you'll be wasting resources. Now, this same principle applied to ICU, applied to hospitals, is also why there's almost always wait time at hospitals, because you like countries don't just have we don't just have unlimited resources to put everything into building lots of hospitals. Like after this, there may be people who think, oh, we should build like tons of hospitals, but then those resources will have to come from somewhere. Yeah, the cost would just go up, you know. So optimization is always an issue. So in this case, we should plan for a pandemic, but nobody wants a pandemic to happen. But now that it's here, you cannot simply just say, okay, so let's just build as much as we can, and then so we can allow people to get sick. Because you can build buildings, but it takes time to train nurses, doctors, you know, because it's not just ventilators, you need people to man the ventilators. Yeah, and last I checked, we don't have robots as nurses and doctors. These are human beings. Yeah. So you can order new machines, you can build new infrastructure, like China just built new, like huge hospital within a few days. And you can do that. But they had to get volunteer medical professionals from all over China to swarm over to Wuhan to cater to whatever was happening there. Yeah, so similarly in Singapore, if people just think, well, if I fall sick, that's my problem, it's no longer just, it's not just our problem. Yeah. Because as much as individuals may think, I don't mind falling sick, but the country cannot simply just say, oh, he said that he don't mind falling sick, so when he falls sick, we don't treat him. Cannot what? Right? I mean, whoever even think of that, right? So we still have to take care of them, and we want to take care of them. We want to take care of everybody who falls sick. But it also means that you can't have people just putting themselves at risk. Yeah. So then how? So how? Yeah. So in the process, I'm sharing all this with you all because sometimes when people see posts, right, you just read what is written. Yeah, and in this case, I've given some thought to these matters. I don't think it's exhaustive or comprehensive. Yeah, but it's not like we just look at something and we just, you know, blabber. Yeah, there are a lot of angles to look at, and of course we should be kind and compassionate. Yeah, but I also wrote about how kindness and compassion, unfortunately, doesn't prevent the person from getting infected. Yeah, unfortunately. I wish just being kind to them and being patient with them will get them, like, give them a bubble of protection. It doesn't work that way. Yeah, unfortunately. So we come to this sutta because this sutta is very interesting. So it's this dialogue between this prince and the Buddha. So it goes that the prince was sort of like being goaded to go and challenge the Buddha, ask Buddha some difficult questions, yeah, and see how the Buddha can respond. So you see in bracket on right speech. So this is this is a note by the translator, Venerable Thanissaro Bhikkhu. Yeah. So let's take a look. I'm going to just skip over the translation notes. I will post the link later, and then y'all can take a look. So the background for this sutta is in Bamboo Grove, yeah, near Rajagaha, the squirrel's sanctuary. Yeah, so I have heard that on one occasion, the Blessed One was staying near Rajagaha in the Bamboo Grove, the squirrel's sanctuary. So this is quite a standard opening, detailing like where the Buddha was and the place, and sometimes also highlight which other disciple is there. The I here would refer to Venerable Ananda, yeah, according to the Buddhist tradition. In the first council, Venerable Mahakashapa convened the first council with 500 arahants, and Venerable Ananda was tasked to recite whatever he has heard of the teachings given by the Buddha. So at that point, then this Prince Abhaya, so Prince Abhaya went to one of the ascetics, Niganta Nataputta, and then on arrival, bowed down to him, sat to one side, and then talked to him. So this Niganta Nataputta told this Prince Abhaya, come now, Prince, refute the words of Gotama, the contemplative, and this admirable report about you will spread afar. The words of Gotama, the contemplative, so mighty, so powerful, were refuted by Prince Abhaya. So this is very interesting because in quite a few suttas, it talks about how the relation between the Buddha and his counterparts, in his peers. So the ascetics or the Brahmins, they number one, the Buddha has by this time built up a certain reputation, that the Buddha's words has weight, is mighty and powerful. In what sense? There were many people who were sent to challenge the Buddha. There were many people who took it upon themselves to go and challenge the Buddha in his teachings. And many of them walk away becoming convinced that the Buddha is actually saying the truth. And as a result, they chose to become a disciple of the Buddha. Hence this description that is the words of the Gotama, the contemplative, is so mighty and powerful. And so here we see Niganta Nataputta goading the prince to challenge the Buddha, so that if he win, then the prince would have the reputation of having refuted the Buddha's words. So then the prince asked, but how, Venerable Sir, will I refute the words of Gotama, the contemplative, so mighty, so powerful? So you asked me to go and challenge the Buddha, so how? In Singlish we like, so how? How to do it? So this Niganta Nataputta basically come out with this ploy, So told him to ask the Buddha, whether the Buddha would say words that are unendearing and disagreeable to others. So this is the opening that this ascetic asked this Prince Abhaya basically to go and challenge the Buddha and ask the Buddha, whether would you say something unendearing and disagreeable? Think about it. In today's context, if you hear someone saying something unendearing, that means not so pleasant, and disagreeable. So say things that, in a way antagonistic, or basically opposing to others. So this is the opening. And then he goes through the different scenario. So if Gotama, the contemplative, so Gotama is the family name and he is the contemplative. So in some translations they use the word ascetic Gotama. So you note that over here, like today when we look at the Buddha, we say Lord Buddha, the Buddha, Sakyamuni Buddha. But in the Buddha's time, they don't always refer to the Buddha as Buddha. In fact, a common reference is ascetic Gotama, the contemplative, or if it's the disciple of the Buddha, they will address the Buddha as the Blessed One, Bhagavan. So here, first scenario, the Buddha, so he is conjecturing, saying that the Buddha would say, would answer, the Tathagata would say words that are unendearing and disagreeable to others. So this is the first outcome. Meaning that the Buddha would reply that yes, he would say that. The Tathagata referring to the Buddha. And then you see this whole setup, and basically, if the Buddha said that, then you should say, then how is there any difference between you, Lord, and run-of-the-mill people? In other words, if you also, as an ascetic, as the Buddha, should say things that is unendearing and disagreeable to others, then what's the difference between you and run-of-the-mill people? That means ordinary people, the common folks. Because why? For even run-of-the-mill people say words that are unendearing and disagreeable to others. So this first scenario, okay? Second scenario, but if Gautama, the contemplative, thus answers, the Tathagata would not say words that are unendearing and disagreeable to others. Then, okay, so second scenario, if the Buddha say no, I will not say that, then what must you say? Then you should say, then how, Lord, did you say of Devadatta that Devadatta is headed for destruction, Devadatta is headed for hell, Devadatta will boil for an eon, Devadatta is incurable for so you see how they are setting the Buddha up for failure. If you answer A, you are wrong. If you answer B, you are also wrong. So Devadatta is the cousin of the Buddha and also one of the monks in those days. And Venerable Devadatta was very interesting as well, because he was like hell-bent, plotting to take over the Buddha. He wants to become the head of the Sangha. So there were some other incidences. I think at this point of time, the fact that the Buddha made this statement, that means Devadatta had already made an attempt for the Buddha's life. Tried to harm him but failed. But just that act, that intent and act itself is enough to cause Devadatta to in future life or in the next immediate life to be reborn in the arbitrary hell. Hence this statement. So using this statement, then this Niganta Nataputta is setting up scenario number 2. That with this, if the Buddha reply no, then you should counter and ask, in that case, how can, but you did say that. And because of what you said, then what happened? Devadatta was upset and disgruntled at those words of yours. You say that you don't say things that's unendearing and disregardable, but Devadatta was upset and disgruntled at those words of yours. Then how do you explain? So set up everything sweet for the Buddha to fail. So when Gautama, the contemplative, is asked this two-pronged question by you, he won't be able to swallow it down or spit it out. Just as if a two-horned chestnut was stuck in a man's throat. I don't know whether you all have seen two-horned chestnuts, but really look like two-horn. And imagine if it's stuck in the throat, that would be quite jialat. So he will not be able to swallow it or down or spit it out. In the same way, when Gautama, the contemplative, is asked this two-pronged question by you, he won't be able to swallow it down or spit it out. So this is the whole setup. Two outcomes, both they have really designed it to, in a way, entrap the Buddha. No matter how he answers, how's he coming up? Well, preparing for a show. So the Prince Abhaya, listening to this, agreed to it, and then he went to see the Buddha. Having seen the Buddha, he arrived, he bowed down to the Buddha, and then sat to one side. So it's quite interesting. He circumambulated the ascetic Niganta Nataputta, and then he went to the Buddha to see the Buddha, the Blessed One. So after that, what happened? After that, he even bowed down to the Buddha. Yeah. So although he's there to challenge the Buddha and sort of entrap the Buddha, he still bowed down and pay respect. And then while he was there, then he looked at the sun and thought, today is not the time to refute the Blessed One's words. Tomorrow, in my home, I will overturn the Blessed One's words. So he said to the Blessed One, may the Blessed One, together with 3 others, acquiesce to my offer of tomorrow's meal. The Blessed One acquiesced with silence. Now over here, there's no clear indication why he looked at the sun and thought today is not the time. Yeah, almost like kan feng shui. But basically, he decided today is not a good time. And take note, he invited not just the Buddha, but together with 3 others. Yeah, there's actually some background to this, and it's about having witness. If he managed to put the Buddha on a spot without witness, then he cannot. There's no proof that he managed to defeat the Buddha. Yeah. So by having 3 others come together, it is to have witness. And he sugarcoated with an offer for a meal. Yeah. So I think we monks can learn something from this. Never a free lunch. Sometimes, maybe. I think most of the time, people offer lunch out of kindness, out of compassion. But over here you can see sometimes it's a trap. So when people offer you lunch, don't be so happy. You must be prepared to answer difficult questions. So far, still okay. I haven't really encountered people who offer lunch just to ask difficult questions. Although sometimes students are afraid to ask questions. In Buddhism, we are more concerned that students don't ask questions, more than that students ask difficult questions. In fact, many times in class, I quite enjoy when, if I can say the word enjoy, in this case, when students ask questions. Because it means that they are really thinking about the subject matter, and it creates the opportunity for us to explore different aspects of the subject matter. So fast forward to the next day. So after that, this prince, before that, Prince Abhaya also circumambulated the Buddha. So the circumambulation meaning you keep your right shoulder facing the person or the object that you are respectful towards, keeping the person towards your right. It has the symbolism of honoring that the person is correct, something like that. So he also do that for the Buddha. Then he left. Unclear whether this is just a show, but seems to be a bit non-congruent. That if he really respects the Buddha, then why would he still go and challenge the Buddha in that way? So, but in some other suttas, there are some individuals who continually ask the Buddha many questions. Yeah. And at the end of it, they admit that actually after the first question, they were convinced already. That means they are sold. Yeah, that they think that the Buddha is really wise and a truth sayer is awakened. But they continue to ask because they delight in the answer, in the way the Buddha answered the questions and in the content and everything. Yeah, so let's take a look. So he arrived, and then the usual pleasantries. But in this case, it's Prince Abhaya's home. So when the Buddha arrived, the prince prepared a seat for the Buddha. The Buddha sat down, and then the prince This is no ordinary person. The prince served the Buddha with his own hands. In many of the sutras, you see when a meal offering is done, the emphasis is almost always there about the person serving with their own hand. To complete the whole process, not just invite and then ask someone to serve, but they would prepare all the food and then serve themselves. So the start with the intent to give all the way until the gift is given, and that means in this case food. So fine, staple, and non-staple food. So both are fine, but staple and non-staple. Staple food would probably refer to things like rice and the flour-based kind of things. So then when the Blessed One had eaten and had removed his hand from his bowl, Prince Abhaya took a lower seat and sat to one side. So this is again, this is there's this practice that we don't interrupt our meal and then continue. It means once we remove our hands from the bowl, we put down the bowl, that's it, we are done with the meal. We don't like put down, then later let's have some more. So when the Buddha removed his hand, then that's indication to Prince Abhaya, okay, the Buddha is done with his meal. If he has any questions, he can ask and consult. It's kind of like in the Western Western food, or rather Western table etiquette, where if you put the fork and spoon in a certain way, then it indicates to the waiter that you're done with the meal, they can clear the table. So here you see in like exactly as they had planned, the Buddha was asked the question, would the Tathagata say words that are unendearing and disagreeable to others? And then the Buddha's reply just totally threw him off course. There is no categorical yes or no answer to that. It means it depends. It's not definite that it will be yes, not definite that it will be no. It depends on the circumstances. And so at this point, Prince Abhaya replied saying that the Nigantas are destroyed. And then the Buddha was like, so why do you say that? And the prince basically just repeated the whole incident to the Buddha and in a way confessed to the Buddha that this was their ploy and their intent. And it was to basically put the Buddha in a spot and get the Buddha to be defeated. So this is what happened. Then the Buddha replied to this, using the circumstances that were present. So here it described, now at the time a baby boy was lying face up on the prince's lap. So this is a baby boy, no indication, let me see. So over here, baby boy on the prince's lap, and then the Buddha very skillfully used that scenario as an example to illustrate his point. So the Blessed One said to the prince, what do you think, prince? If this young boy, through your own negligence or that of the nurse, were to take a piece of, or take a stick or a piece of gravel into its mouth, what would you do? So young boy, baby boy, maybe, I don't know how old, there's no indication of the age, but young enough to be lying on the prince's lap. And here indication that it's through the prince, like the scenario painted is whether it's through the negligence of the prince or that of the nurse. That means the person taking care of the kid. If the boy were to take a piece of stick or a piece of gravel into his mouth, what would the prince do? So here there's no question about whether the boy knows what he's doing. Apparently the boy is too young to know. So small kids, just anything put inside the mouth. And regardless of the circumstances, whether it's your fault or his fault, whether it's the fault of the prince or the fault of the nurse, doesn't matter. The thing is, now this happened. What would you do? So the prince replied, I would take it out, Lord. Yeah, of course. The kid put something that is not supposed to be in the mouth, he put it in, of course he will take it out. So if I couldn't get it out right away, then holding its head in my left hand and crooking a finger of my right, I would take it out, even if it meant drawing blood. Even if it meant drawing blood. It means even if in the process it will cause a bit of, abrasion, or maybe cause the child to bleed, you have to do it. Yeah, and why? Why is that? Because I have sympathy for the young boy. It is out of sympathy, or if I may use the word compassion for the young boy, that this is done. So this is very interesting. This is not from the Buddha. This is a reply from the prince. Yeah. So the Buddha is very skillful in this way. He just used a very ordinary circumstances, yeah, that people can directly relate to, and get them to think for themselves. Yeah. Up to this point, the Buddha didn't expound any deep teachings, or according to this teaching or that teaching. The Buddha just used a real life example. If this happened, what would you do? And this comes from the prince, that the prince would remove it, even if it means drawing blood. Now, having established this common ground, yeah, so then the Buddha told the prince, in the same way, prince, and he listed out, yeah, here there are 6 different cases. So let's look at them. In the case of words that the Tathagata knows to be unfactual, untrue, unbeneficial, yeah, this bracket means that this is what the translator interprets, yeah, or not connected with the goal. Because in the case of the Buddha, whatever teaching, whatever is said, for it to be fruitful, it should be connected with the goal. That means Nibbana. So unendearing and disagreeable, he does not say them. Yeah. So there are a few criteria here: unfactual, untrue, unbeneficial. In what way? Not connected to the goal. Then unendearing and disagreeable. Yeah. So there are 5 things mentioned. The first 2 is about whether it's factual and true or not. The third one is whether it produces benefit. The last 2 is about how the person, the recipient, would feel. Okay? So you put them together, there's a certain number of combination. Over here there are 6 permutation. The first one is untrue, unfactual, not beneficial, and people don't feel good. Yeah? So the Buddha said he will not say that. Second scenario, knows to be factual, true, factual and true, but unbeneficial, yeah, and unagreeable, yeah, the unendearing, disagreeable to others, he will not say. So this second scenario. Second scenario is interesting because it's factual and true, but unbeneficial. Now, usually we think that things that are factual and true will definitely be beneficial, but not always. Yeah, not always the case. Something can be factual and true, but not necessarily beneficial. So, for example, okay, like today I had wanted to use the whiteboard, the surface to write, but I end up referring to the sutta, so I don't need to use it. So now, if I were to tell you that the battery has 1 flat, it's factual, it's true, but it doesn't give you any. Oh wait, what happened? Someone is calling me. Usually, people call me to tell me that. Okay, why? Can string the. So a student responded asking me. so that the words on the left and right are not truncated. Oh, I didn't know that it's truncated. Oh, sorry. This is the next scenario. Second scenario, factual true but not beneficial. Yeah, so there are a lot of things that is factual and true but not beneficial. But of course, benefit here can be different kind of benefit. Yeah, things that may be true but not beneficial towards cultivation. Yeah, and if you were to then take this, later we can look at it, or rather we can look at it now. If you consider, there are a lot of things that is factual and true, but not relevant to, or not beneficial as far as the COVID-19 is concerned. Yeah, it may not help the person to know something, whether something is true or not. Yeah, it doesn't help them in preventing infection, for example. Yeah, so then maybe we shouldn't say it. Number 3, factual, true, and beneficial, but unendearing, okay, and disagreeable. So first 2 case is where the person find it unendearing and disagreeable, and at the same time the first 2 cases are non-beneficial. Okay, so as long as it's non-beneficial, whether it's factual or not factual, and people find it unendearing and disagreeable, then don't say it. Third case and fourth case. Okay, let's see. So the third case, beneficial, factual, true, so fulfill all the things, but people find it unendearing and disagreeable. He has a proper sense of the time. He has a sense of the proper time for saying them. So the Buddha has this sense. I think I don't have the sense. Sometimes when I say something, people don't like it. Yeah, have to find the right timing. But it doesn't mean we don't say no, just because people don't like it. Yeah, but have to find the right time, right place, perhaps, and maybe find the right person to say it. Yeah, so like if we have the Dalai Lama say it, maybe people will find it agreeable. In the case of words that the Tathagata knows to be unfactual, untrue, unbeneficial, but endearing and agreeable to others, he does not say them. So this is the mark of a soothsayer. Say things that make people feel good, but untrue, unfactual, untrue, unbeneficial. In this case, the Buddha don't say it. Just because people feel good, then you say no. The Buddha don't do such a thing. Number 5, factual, true, unbeneficial, but unendearing and agreeable to others, the Buddha also don't say. So you can start to see a pattern. As long as it's unbeneficial in some ways, here unbeneficial, underbeneficial, all these cases where it's unbeneficial, the Buddha don't say. When it's beneficial but people don't like it, he find a proper time. How about number 6? Something that is factual, true, and beneficial, and endearing and agreeable. Wow, you tick all the check boxes. Still, the Buddha has a sense of the proper time for saying them. And why is that? Because the Tathagata has sympathy for living beings. So he speaks out of compassion for sentient beings to benefit them. So choosing the right time to speak is also very important. So I think I have overshot time. So then at this point, this is the part with reference to the child. And this is the core part of what I wanted to share for today actually. If you see someone out without masks. You know, there are some videos about people chasing each other, like why are you not wearing a mask and so on, and then filming them. I don't know. I think everybody have to come to this awareness, and it's just not in our culture currently to wear masks. I think many years back when I go to countries like Taiwan, places like Taiwan, Hong Kong, there's already a culture of wearing masks. I think some people told me that in some countries, because of the pollution, so they are quite used to wearing a mask. But I think in some of these countries, there's also this sense of civic mindedness, where when they fall sick, they will wear a mask if they need to go out. So there's already such a culture. In Singapore, we don't have this culture. Yeah, I'm not saying this is a good reason or excuse for not wearing a mask, but this could be why it's just not a natural thing. Unfortunately, again, just because it's not natural doesn't mean that the virus will say, oh, this person is not wearing a mask because it's not natural, so I will give you a pass. Tomorrow I come back, and if you are still not wearing a mask, I'll infect you. No, it doesn't work that way. You know, it's not like the virus will discriminate and say, hey, this person is supposed to be used to wearing masks, no? Why are you not wearing masks? I punish you, I infect you. No, that's not the case. Yeah. So, 2 cases out of the 6. It is not completely exhaustive. Yeah. If you look at the sequences, I think 2 by 3 permutation, yeah, I think covers all the cases. So there are only 2 cases where the Buddha will speak, and in both cases it's because it's beneficial. Yeah. So regardless of whether people find it endearing and disagreeable or not, yeah, the Buddha would still speak, but he would have a sense of the proper time for saying them. So if we were to be out and we encounter someone who is not wearing, I think I grew up with a sense that in Singapore, many times we have this idea, you know, mind your own business. Yeah. If people break the law, that's not a problem. Yeah, I don't know. Is that the case for you all? The impression I have growing up is I've been told by many of my elders and people around me who tell me like don't be busybody. Yeah, people break the law, that's their problem. Yeah, people jaywalk, that's their problem. People cross the road, people don't follow traffic rule like this, like that, whatever. Don't go and you go and tell people off. They get angry with you, they come and attack you. There's this culture, I think, to some extent. I don't know about the younger generation, yeah, but growing up in the 70s, 80s, I think there is a bit of this culture. Yeah, and it's not about whether you snitch or not, but it's more that we are afraid of the lashback. Yeah. But at this point, but I never quite connect with that notion. I never quite connect with that notion. So oftentimes my parents and those seniors around me would tell me like, why are you so stupid? Yeah, other people their problem don't, you know. But at this point in time, this is no longer other people's problem, you know. Because if one person don't wear the mask, the person infect 1.3%, you know, and that is not a linear equation, no. It's exponential. In fact, one person, the person infect multiples. Within a short time, you start to see that exponential curve. Yeah. So when is a good time to speak up? Frankly, I also don't know. Yeah, because even for Shifu, when I speak up, uh, it's not always endearing and agreeable. Yeah, and sometimes it may be misconstrued that, oh, yeah, Shifu is not compassionate. The truth is, I also tell people that I'm not so compassionate. Yeah, but I also wonder which is more compassionate. Yeah, I agree that in some specific cases, yeah, like the discussion the past few days about elderlies who are unclear about things and so on and so forth. I think we have to be understanding, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that we stop short of telling them. Yeah, it's like if small kids, they don't understand the danger of the busy street and they play on the street and the ball is in the street and they run out, do we then, boy, come, do we speak nicely because we have to be understanding? We would scream and shout at the kid, isn't it? Even if it frightened the kid for a while, but it will save his life. Yeah, I think it not easy to do, as the Buddha has said before, not easy to do things without anybody criticizing. Yeah, not in the past, in the future, or the present. So when is a good time? Sometimes by the time we find the right time, maybe a bit too late. Yeah. But perhaps we can try our best to speak in a gentle way. You know, so far I've seen a lot of videos where the person taking the video would almost sound like a, police, like that. Like, how come, or in an accusative tone, why are you not wearing? Perhaps instead, if we were to just offer a mask. Yeah, I also heard of cases where people offer a mask and the other person also respond in a very aggressive manner. Maybe that's why we have all the ambassadors and police going around. There's no, this exceptional times. Yeah, I wrote somewhere, exceptional times call for exceptional measures. Yeah, and as again I repeat, it's no longer our own business. If everybody do their part, this thing can be over sooner. And regardless of why individuals don't wear a mask, whether it's because they outrightly don't care, or they unknowingly don't care, don't know, or they have dementia, they are like this or like that. But as long as you go out without a mask, you risk infection. And if you risk infection, the spread is going to continue. Yeah. So that's all I have to share today. Of course, this sutta itself has more. Maybe next week I can cover the rest. And there are more implications than just about people not wearing masks, because this teaching is about how we be aware of our own speech. Yeah. And when I read through this, I don't read through this thinking that I always know the proper time. Oftentimes I think as an afterthought, I'm like, maybe didn't have to or shouldn't have said. Yeah. And for myself, I try my best to catch. One simple rule of thumb I do for myself is, if I say it, will the person be able to accept it? Yeah. Sometimes I remember and then I catch it. Sometimes I forget, then I just blast it out. Yeah. So if you find that sometimes Shifu says certain things, it's not agreeable, it's not endearing, minimally have the faith that monks and nuns, the Sangha, we don't have any vested interest to win some argument with you. That we have good intent and your interest at heart. And if you get it wrong, okay, then find a time to tell us and show us how it's wrong. But if not, then put aside how we feel. Yeah, as much as we can, focus on the message and ask yourself, is it valid? Yeah, and I think this rings true for many other aspects of our life as well. As they say, 忠言逆耳. Yeah, words that is true, that is loyal, that is sincere, not pleasant to the ears. Okay, I've really exceeded too much time. We will wrap up here. Yeah, we'll wrap up here, and we'll come back to other topics next week. If you have any topics that is of interest to you, please post to the video, or you can send a message to this page, and then we'll cover it. Next week is the last week of the month, so next week is open Q&A. Yeah, ask me anything. Okay. So with that, I want to wish all of you safety, good health, and peace at home. 愿消三障诸烦恼，愿得智慧真明了，普愿罪障悉消除，世世常行菩萨道。阿弥陀佛，起立。Till we meet again, may be guided and protected by the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And as always, 乖乖 stay at home, 乖乖 wear mask, 乖乖念佛，打坐，阿弥陀佛。Okay, let me switch out the scene. Okay, take care. See you all next week.